And I'd like to recognize the gentlewoman from New York, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. That was just a lot. And I think it's really important that it's addressed very directly right now and in this moment. First and foremost, I don't want to hear a single person on this committee or outside of this committee talk about valuing life when they continue to uphold the death penalty, when they continue to support policies that disproportionately incarcerate and lead to the deaths of Black men and people throughout this country, and uphold an absolutely unjust medical system that exists for profit that allows people to die because they can't afford to live. In addition to that, if we want to talk about Planned Parenthood, let's talk about how many lives Planned Parenthood has saved and how many babies have been born because of the prenatal care provided by Planned Parenthood. And if you don't believe it, and if you've never met a Planned Parenthood baby, I'm happy to let you know that I am one, and that my mother received and relied on prenatal care from Planned Parenthood when she was pregnant with me. And so if we're concerned about life, we don't get to talk about anyone else who's not concerned about the full spectrum of that when we are upholding policies that kill people. Moving on.
Important to know that until 1966, we had apartheid in the racial apartheid, known as Jim Crow, in the United States of America. Now, during that era of Jim Crow, Representative Thompson, as you noted, that includes a polling tax, correct?
Yes, it does.
That includes voter ID laws, stringent voter ID laws back in that time, correct?
Yes.
Citizenship
yes.
Checks, correct?
Yes.
Difficult hours to vote during Jim Crow, correct?
Right.
And you had the normalization of white supremacist voters monitoring and intimidating Black voters at polling locations during the era of Jim Crow, correct?
That's correct.
Now, let's walk through some of the dangerous measures proposed by your Texas state Republican colleagues and supported by Governor Abbott they're trying to enact today. So the proposed Texas bills, SB 1, HB 3, would set new ID requirements, so voters must provide their driver's license number, or if they don't have one, the last 4 digits of their Social Security or a signed affidavit, correct?
Right.
Now, they would also place a ban on the distribution of mail-in ballot applications, correct?
Correct.
As well as monthly citizenship checks. Monthly citizenship checks for voter registration, correct?
Correct.
They would also ban extended hours during early voting. Is that correct?
For those persons we call essential workers who helped us during the pandemic, yes.
And the proposed bills today, right now, will create an array of new criminal penalties and requirements for folks who assist voters at the polls or people who assist others planning to vote by mail. Is that correct?
That is correct.
These bills would then expand the authority of partisan poll watchers by granting them, quote unquote, what is known as free movement at a polling location, which could allow them to harass voters, correct?
People with no training coming in your area.
Representative Thompson, this sounds an awful lot like the Jim Crow that you grew up in and were born into. Based on your lived experience, would you say that these proposed voting laws are remnants of Jim Crow? I shouldn't even say remnants, revivals, an attempted revival at Jim Crow?
Absolutely, Jim Crow 3.0.
Communities, indigenous communities, we know that there is no such thing as cheap energy, because the price of cheap energy has always been our lives, our health, our lungs, our cancer rates. So maybe it's cheap for someone else in a mansion that gets to breathe clean air in a nice property, but it is not cheap for the 1.2 million people in this city alone that live within striking distance of a peaker plant.
Now, what happens when the FBI does find instances of white nationalists in local law enforcement? What does the FBI do?
Well, if the individuals are part of an ongoing or conducting or plan to conduct any type of criminal actions, we would, along with the U.S. Attorney's Office, try to open an investigation and determine whether or not there are charges. if the individual is showing that they are memberships of a group that may be deemed to be a racist or a group that's focused on hate, that becomes the departmental issue on how that they will proceed with that employee.
Okay, so it sounds like there isn't a protocol for what to do when a police officer is found to be part of a white supremacist organization.
No, ma'am. There's no central method to notify the FBI about violent extremism. Again, stressing the importance of partnership between local law enforcement and the FBI.
Okay,
and
so
DHS.
that's something that I just would like the committee to note, that that there's no currently existing protocol of what to do when a member of law enforcement is discovered to be part of an organization like the Ku Klux Klan. But this is very important information. I thank you for your candor. I need to correct and address an assertion that was made not too long ago. This idea, this myth that, first of all, that this law, SB 8, provides ample time for a victim of abuse to seek abortion care. Because once again, we're in a room of legislators who are attempting to legislate reproductive systems that they know nothing about. 6 weeks pregnant, and it's shameful that this education even needs to happen because this conversation shouldn't even be held in a legislative body. 6 weeks pregnant is 2 weeks late for one's period. When you are raped, you don't always know what happened to you. You are shocked, and I speak about this as a survivor. You are in so much shock. And by the way, people who commit abuse and victims and survivors of sexual assault are overwhelmingly assaulted by someone they know. And this myth that it's some person lurking on a street or in a parking lot waiting to sexually assault you, that myth only benefits the abusers in power that want you to think that that's how it happens. It's your friend, it's a boyfriend, it's a boss, it's a legislator. You know, it's not lost on me that we are having a hearing today surrounding fossil fuel misinformation and disinformation campaigns on the same day that we are scheduled to vote on legislation that has been deeply influenced by the lobbying efforts of the fossil fuel industry. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to be speaking with the CEOs of BP, Chevron, Exxon, Shell, and the American Petroleum Institute. Speaking of which, Mr. Summers, as the president of the American Petroleum Institute, part of your job is to help lobby and advocate and champion the fossil fuel industry. And that includes particularly in legislation before the United States Congress. You told CNN on television, quote, "We are leaving everything on the field here in terms of our opposition to reconciliation. We are using every tool at our disposal to work against these energy proposals." And frankly, Mr. Summers, I appreciate your candor because most lobbying organization heads aren't as forthright and transparent about their efforts to manipulate US legislation. So what does that all-out approach look like? Am I correct, Mr. Summers, that the oil and gas industry overall, including the companies that you represent and members you represent today, has spent about $55.6 million in lobbying within the last 10 months? Earlier, one of my colleagues, Representative San Nicolas, said that Robinhood owes its customers a lot more than an apology, and I happen to agree with him. I believe that the decisions made by you and this company have harmed your customers. Mr. Tenev, would you be willing to commit today to voluntarily pass on the proceeds of the payment for order flow to Robinhood customers?
Congresswoman, I appreciate that question. When the statement you referred to was made, I believe 2015 or 2016, It was before Robinhood forced the entire industry to drop commissions and replicate our business model, which made payment.
So is that I should take that as a no. You're not willing to pass on the proceeds of payment for order flow to your customers?
When the other brokers dropped.
I'm just talking about today, right now.
Payment for order flow, Congresswoman, allows for commission-free trading. In the context of trading commissions, it's a much larger source of revenue in the past than payment.
Mr. Teneff, I apologize, and I don't want to be rude. I just have limited time. But if removing the revenues that you make from a payment for order flow would cause the removal of free commissions, doesn't that mean that trading on Robinhood isn't actually free to begin with? Because you're just hiding the cost in terms of potentially poor execution or the cost of lost rebates to your customers.
What we have here is that the order was not issued after a conversation with DC Mayor Bowser. The order to clear the Capitol was not issued after a conversation with Speaker Pelosi. It was not issued after a conversation with Leader Schumer. This conversation with Vice President Pence happened at 4:08, and at 4:32 was when the actual verbal authorization, according to the Department of Defense, happened. That was nearly 3 hours after Mayor Bowser first requested National Guard assistance. Why did it take 92 minutes after ordering the full mobilization of the DC National Guard at 3 p.m. to authorize and help clear the Capitol at 4:32?
And I'm sorry, and I think this is a great conversation, and I want to be completely helpful. So at 3 p.m., gave the order to deploy, to mobilize the National Guard. Then the planning sequence went forward. So the concept of the operation, the plan, was approved at the time
so
you
it took,
detonated.
And I apologize just because I have a short period of time. So it took 90 minutes to plan to send the National Guard to the Capitol. Now, Major General Walker testified that it actually wasn't until 5:08 p.m. that he finally received authorization to deploy his forces to the Capitol. Mr. Miller, do you have any reason to doubt Major General Walker's recollection of events that day?
I do not have any reason to doubt. I think there's, I hate to bring up Clausewitz, but the fog and friction, and there was so much going on. So I can understand there's an inconsistency and it's perhaps disagreement.
Thank you very much. I yield my time.